Hello, R users. My name is John Kulas. I am a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, 12-year user of R for normal, boring, statistical, and analytical operations. But for the majority of those 12 years, for 10 years or so, I've also been crafting whatever the project is that I'm doing the analysis for. I've been crafting that entire project from within the same environment that I specify my R script and R analyses. And so every week I hang out here on YouTube at 7 o'clock Eastern and just make myself available if there's other people out there who are interested in kind of building skill in terms of using this workflow. I refer to it as single platform project execution. So you're not going back and forth between R and Word or R and PowerPoint or R and whatever it is you're trying to build, Adobe. No, just do it all within the same environment that you do your R analyses. And so I really believe that this is the way that data scientists, if that's still a thing, people who are working with quantitative tasks, I really think that this is the way the work should be structured. And so I'm here every week in this kind of interactive, open-ended kind of forum using the metaphor of an academic office hour with the thought that if anyone else is interested in this, please ask questions, post them in the comments, in the chat, and I'll try to address them. And so that's kind of the priority of these weekly sessions. That's why I do it live and unscripted. But in the absence of someone popping by and saying, how do I do something, we've been taking a look at focused features of these platforms that help facilitate what we're doing. The primary platform that we've been using is called Quarto. And there's a tutorial that I put in the chat in terms of you building your own report if you want to start kind of from scratch and see how to go ahead and do that. In order for that tutorial to work, you're going to need Quarto installed on your machine. This week's slides are also in the chat. They're also linked in the description to the video down below. Either way, if you do access the slides, you're going to have a lot of interactive capabilities there. This one in particular on the second slide, or the first slide after the title slide, has a hyperlink to this resource that talks about Quarto, and you can learn more about it if you don't get enough from me. But they'll also walk you through the installation there. So I hope people avail themselves of those sorts of resources. I have a lot of fun. I've mentioned it many times, but I have a lot of fun putting these together. I just love these slides. But for being a professor for 20 years, well, first of all, I didn't use slides until it was beaten into my head from students that I needed to. But someone that's relied on PowerPoint, like most, I guess, probably do, it's been so much thing using this different method. And I've been doing it now. This is the 115th slide deck just on these weekly sessions. And so I use these for literally everything. So I probably have a couple hundred of these that I've now done, and I'm not sick of it. I still love it. I still think it's a lot of fun. But in terms of these features that we've been taking a focused look at, we've also been climbing the alphabet. I guess this is relevant for tonight's topic, but we've been using the English alphabet. And we're at the letter U right now, so we're gonna soon get up to Z, which is kind of exciting because I feel a little constrained in terms of topics. I wasn't really sure what we were gonna do for the letter U. I literally broke out a dictionary, and for those of you who may not know, dictionaries were actually hard copy, really thick tomes that had words in them and definitions of words. This particular dictionary was saved by my brother just recently. I forgot I won it when I was a Boy Scout. I was never a Boy Scout. I was a Cub Scout, which is like the kindergarten of scouting. But I won it at a Cub Scout banquet. And my brother remembered it, and he saved it, and he gave it to me. So anyway, I was paging through the letter U in this dictionary that I won when I was a little kid, and I came across unceal. I don't know what an unceal is, but we're gonna find out what uncials are tonight. And so we're really going to focus on fonts. So even though grammatically I'm kind of I'm kind of capitalizing on some weird words here, but we're not going to focus only on umlauts, unicode, and uncials, but we're just going to look at fonts and maybe some unusual fonts, and maybe take a little deeper dive into how we get some of the fancy scripting on slides like this. Because remember, ultimately what we're doing, it's different than PowerPoint or Google Slides. When we're crafting something like this, we're using plain text to specify what we want. So we're actually communicating more directly with the computer in terms of these are the elements I'm interested in. So we're going to get a little bit into how the computer recognizes these special characters, like umlauts, for example. Okay, so before we get into the umlauts, let's see what happened last week. Where's our train? Oh, if I was bad about this last week. So I'm here promoting this every week. If you want to help out, if you want to promote as well, you can like the video. That maybe will get it out to a few more people. And also subscribe to the channel if you would like to be notified of when we go live on these weekly sessions. Or to tell you the secret, it's always pretty much at 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. Okay, so let's get our Bullwinkle transition here into what happened last week.
Well, last time, Rocky and Peter Peachfuzz had caught up with a mystery plane bearing Bullwinkle and his weather forecasting bunion. But as they drew near, Bullwinkle's captors aimed a strange weapon back at them.
Okay, fire, Headley.
And from the oddly shaped muzzle came a huge cloud.
Hokey smoke, Captain!
Yes, it's a hokey smoke screen.
I can't see a thing!
Never fear, Rocky. I'll just zoom over the smoke.
But as usual, Captain Peachfuzz punched the wrong lever. Instantly, the engine stopped and the plane plummeted toward the ocean.
Turn it off, Hadley. They won't give us any more trouble.
And the plane with Bullwinkle aboard flew on to its unknown destination.
Gonna try to be a little shorter with those. Recently, my method to chop those up, I had to go to a different piece of software. And so it's easier for me to now go a little longer with this. So I have to rein myself in, or I have to remind myself of Pasquale, one of the compatriots that sometimes pops by. He did, I think he might have been the one that said, yeah, that's a little long, Kulas. You might want to keep those a little shorter. So anyway, I'm aware of it. Last week, we took a look at typst, and typst is a type of document specification that produces PDF output. And typst is really fun, it's really neat. But last week, we ran into a couple of issues. The first issue, I'm happy that these happen because I like it when something doesn't happen immediately and you have to do a little searching and figure out why it didn't work. And so last week, one of the things, it just reinforces and deepens the learning that you have from that event. And so last week, one of the things that didn't work exactly as we thought it would when we were taking a look at typst was how we specify column layouts. And in HTML products, so for example, on these slides that you're looking at, there's a no-go left-hand column and there's an effective right-hand column. The syntactic structure that I use, there's multiple ways to do this, but kind of my go-to for creating a layout like this is to use this columns div. And so within the columns division itself, which is the opening fence as well as the closing fence, I can specify where I want stuff, how wide I want the column, and there's all kinds of attributes that you can add. But typically I just focus on the width of those columns, and then I put content within this secondary fence. And it gets, you've heard me discuss this over the weeks, that it does get messy in terms of nesting fences within fences. And so it's not ideal, I guess, in terms of a structure, but it's the syntactic, it's the structure that we're given and the structure that we need to work with if we're operating within Quarto. We don't need to, but it's kind of the common way to structure columns in this particular case. So that specification works fine in HTML products, but it wasn't working with typst. Typst just ignored it, and that's not entirely surprising. I don't recall last week if we tried layout or if we just said we probably need to specify layout. And so a second way, and again, this isn't exhaustive, there's a third way and there's a fourth way. So there's multiple ways to actually do this, but a second way to isolate content within your typist document, and so that is to say I don't want the entire document to have 2 columns or 3 columns or 4 columns, but I just want this focused element to be presented in 2 or 3 or 4 columns. The kind of more straightforward way to do this is to use, again, these fenced divs, but instead of within the curly brackets, instead of the .column specification, I'm gonna explicitly articulate that I want the layout to consist of a number of columns. And now this number can be any integer you want, and what Quarto is going to do is it's going to equally distribute content that you have across those however many columns you've specified. And so the content can be a table, it can be a figure, it can be a picture, it can be words. And actually we've tried this. When we first played with Typist, we played with this number of column specification up to a ridiculous number. I think we did 7 or 8, and it handles it fine. So your content obviously starts to become a little, if it's words, your content starts to become a little funny looking, but in terms of the capabilities itself, that number 2, you can extend that quite a bit. And so this is the specification that I would recommend using if you want to isolate content and display that content within columns. Now, there's an additional consideration here. If you wanted to control how the distribution of content goes across those columns, you'd probably want a little more specificity here than using this layout-encall command. But the layout-encall is really slick, easy, quick, and it's a good way to do what we were trying to do, which is just distribute content across 2 columns. We did also see some extensions, and this is what I was planning on focusing most of our time last week on, was not the default typist document, which is just a PDF, but seeing if we can actually display information in a manner that's a little more visually interesting. And so we could spend time just within the default typist Quarto specification and do things like rearrange columns and put in logos and maybe add some colors and fonts. Or we could rely on the work that someone else has already done to kind of get us halfway there. And so we were looking at extensions that facilitate the creation of different types of PDFs. And so one of them that we looked at was just kind of like a business letter. I guess I call it a pro letter here, or a business letter. And it has a header, it has kind of a date area to be printed, it has the main body of your letter, it has address, and all of this stuff is typeset in different locations, left justified, right justified, etc., etc. And so this extension worked fine, and it rendered great. And the way in which, once you install the extension within a project directory, again, the recommendation with any extension for Quarto is to activate that or store that or use that within a project directory. So the way in which, as long as your Quarto specification, what you're looking at here is the front matter of a Quarto specified file, what I've sometimes referred to as a QMD, that's just the file extension. But the way that you actually activate the extension itself and say, hey, I want this thing that I'm creating to look like what the picture looks like on the left, is to use these line 11 and 12 specifications. So format letter-typist :default. And that's kind of a shared convention that the authors of this extension use across different extension types. So that was fine, it worked great. We had a little bit of a surprise with the 3 other extensions that we looked at. And each of those 3 other extensions, none of them wanted to render. So this is a problem that I'm not pumped about. So this is a problem that I don't like to encounter. And the reason I don't like to encounter this type of problem is because I think this is the type of problem that discourages people from using these workflows. So the type of problem that we had here was we kind of had a fatal error where what we specified in the script was not providing us any sort of product whatsoever. And usually when that happens, it's user error. So typically when that happens, it's something that you've done and you can overcome it. The suspicion last week was this might be somehow in the software itself, not within the user. And that's what I fear encountering when I share these processes with other people. So I can overcome it and it doesn't discourage me, but I understand that that's the type of consequence and outcome and possibility that is going to scare a lot of people away from using these processes. And so that's why this is not a cherished, embraced type of error. Usually I'm happy when mistakes and problems and failures happen because, again, that's just more opportunity for deeper learning. This one, unfortunately, has the when you're crafting a document within Word or within PowerPoint, there's never any sort of concern that when you hit save or print, that what you see on the screen is going to be duplicated or you're going to have a faithful representation of that. That is I guess it might be a slight possibility in those situations as well. Somebody could walk by and trip over your power cord and maybe pull it out. And we've all had situations where maybe you've saved over something. Anyway, so I think it's probably fair to say when you interact with a piece of software from Microsoft, like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, you're never going to have any question of the reliability of your process itself or the reliability of getting the product type that you want. And there just is that possibility using these processes that we're talking about. Now, it doesn't happen often. It's a very rare circumstance for something to not give you a product and for it to be not a you problem. So I'm making up a number here, but 99.1% of the time when something goes wrong using these processes, the software itself is fine. It's great. It's a weird specification in terms of it's a weird error in terms of your specification of the scripting. And the reason that's important is that's an easy fix. It's going to be frustrating for people when especially early on when you're adopting these processes, when you find those errors, it's going to be frustrating. But again, with the AI kind of tools that we have available to us right now, the increasing level of specification and helpfulness that these error messages give us in terms of where to look and what might be wrong, just from the software itself, those have gotten better and better and better over the years. So anyway, so the issue that we had last week turned out to be, I guess I don't know how deep I should go on this, but the more recent versions of Quarto are using an updated typist language compiler, and so the version that the more recent version of Quarto is using is version 0.13. Now, typist, like any language, has rules. And the rules of typist, the language itself, became more restrictive when typist advanced from version 0.11 to version 0.12. And so the issue that we actually ran into was the extensions that we wanted to check out. So the AMS copy edited, let me pull up my R Studio here and maybe we'll just do one of these. So the extensions that we were interested in checking out were actually written with language, and we can actually look at the language itself here. So the language that is used to create what we're interested in looks like this. And this is what you get when you install one of these extensions. And there's one little piece of information in here that contains logic that was valid in typist version 0.11, but typist version 0.12 said, we don't want to be that permissive anymore. We want to be more conservative and more restrictive, and so we're not gonna let that go. And so the errors that we had last week had everything to do with this change in rules that typist implemented in terms of what it's allowing within the language itself, in terms of the logical rules with the language itself. So Quarto, the more recent versions of Quarto, they use, of course, because you should, they use the most recent kind of typist language restrictions, but these extensions are still using the old language they're still using language that was permitted in older versions of typist. And again, this is where it gets kind of confusing. So there's a couple of solutions that I thought of and that I actually did. So you can see now, this is what we tried to create last week and weren't able to do, but I'm able to get it just fine on my machine. The reason I'm able to get it just fine on my machine is because I actually went back and I went backwards in terms of the version of Quarto that I installed on my machine. So I uninstalled the most recent version, which is 1.8.6, I think, which is what I had been using for the last few months. And I had to go 2 versions of Quarto back, not because of Quarto, but because of the typist compiler that comes bundled with Quarto. And I don't know if compiler is the right word, but so the way in which Quarto interacts with typist script in order to produce a PDF, they were using the old kind of rules and old definitions of typist. So this is 2 versions ago, and 2 versions ago works fine with these extensions. The modern version, the most updated Quarto, is going to throw some errors. And so there's a couple of workarounds. You can, like I did right here, you can go to an older version of Quarto if you really want to use those extensions, or you can just you can actually change the template. So in that file that I showed you that had the scripting that was in a weird looking language, that language is actually typist script. You can go in and amend the little tiny 1-line bit of code that is throwing an error in those extensions. Now the other thing I did was I filed an issue on the team that's working on this extension. I don't know the extent to which they're monitoring this. It doesn't look like a lot. So you can see the last update here to these extensions that we happened to stumble across is from 2 years ago. So I imagine that no one is going to address this issue. There's a few open issues here. And it's a little one and it's an overcomable one. So I wouldn't expect, I don't know. I'm not holding my breath that this is going to be a change that the team that's putting together these extensions chooses to focus on. So if I want to use these, I'm either going to go into the typist source file and the template itself within that _ extensions folder and change it, which you can do with the help of AI without knowing typist. Or alternatively, and this is a bit, I think, messier. It's easier in one sense, but it's a bit messier in terms of other types of products that you might want to use the most updated version of Quarto for. The other alternative here is to just use an older version of Quarto like I did. So next week I'll probably go in and update Quarto, because really the only reason that I went back to that older one is to prove to myself and prove to you that those extensions work. They just needed an older They just needed an older interpreter for the typist language that was more permissive, and that came bundled in an older version of Quarto. Okay, so today what I thought we would take a look at is kind of some scripting capabilities within these platforms, and modern IDEs allow you to copy and paste strange symbols. So umlauts are vowels that have those two dots over them. The dots themselves are not, I don't believe, called umlauts. I believe it's the entire character that's an umlaut. And these have different pronunciations. These are in a few different, I believe, languages. German is probably the most prominent one, the most commonly encountered one that uses umlauts. I think some Scandinavian languages use them too, or something that looks like an umlaut anyway. The dots themselves, there's a different name for those. It's D something. I forget what it is. Man, this was a vocabulary lesson this week, is preparing for this, putting uncials together and umlauts and looking into what all those different words actually mean. But so you can actually copy and paste these what I'm calling special characters, and a special character is just something that's not from the English alphabet, or something that's unique and not shared with the English alphabet. You can copy and paste those into most editors now. So Jupyter Lab, you should be able to do that. RStudio, certainly you can do that. Positron, I didn't verify, but I'm guessing that you probably can copy and paste these unique characters directly. But historically, you couldn't do that. And there are also potential situations where you're going to have a platform in which you want to share the specification of these special characters, and the editor is not going to be permissive with that. And so historically, what we needed to do is we needed to actually know the code, the computer code that would represent that special character. So in your scripting, what you're specifying looks quite a bit different from what you expect it to be rendered like. And so for umlauts, there's a couple of different ways in which we can specify umlauts. We should be able to just copy and paste, which most people are going to prefer. But we can also use what are called numerical character references. And the pieces of information that are going to be important for us in terms of using these numerical character references are the opening ampersand and the closing semicolon. Opening ampersand, closing semicolon tells our software interpreters, whether that's a web browser or whether that's Quarto, it tells it that this is something special in here. So we're going to specify these characters a few different ways, but one of the ways that I really want to show people how to specify these is using the old style, which is the actual character codes themselves. Now, related to that ampersand semicolon specification, there are going to be different codes that are associated with characters that we want to represent. The most, I think, universal code that we can pull from is called Unicode. And so Unicode is a character mapping that specifies what should be displayed based on a sequence of values. Now, they use that hexadecimal kind of system that we've seen most prominently with colors. So when we want to specify colors within the processes that we're using, we use hexadecimal codes. And so that is just values ranging from 0 to 9 and then A through F. So there's 16 characters. It goes a little bit beyond just 0 to 9. And these Unicode specifications also use hexadecimal characters. Now, Unicode is kind of the modern version of what, when I grew up, was called ASCII. So ASCII is ASCII. It's an acronym. I couldn't take apart that acronym for you, but I'm sure you can look it up if you want. I do know that ASCII characters were limited to 128. So there were 128 specifications of ASCII characters. And again, the reason this is important is to a computer, the symbols and characters that we see They're meaningful for us as humans, but behind the scenes, there's a code that tells the computer that this is what I want to be displayed. And so ASCII was intended to be used for the English alphabet. And so 128 characters was fine for ASCII. Now, there's 26 letters in the English alphabet, A through Z, but then there's also numbers, 0 through 9. There's exclamation points, question marks, all that sort of stuff, commas. And so you can see where you can start to run up to that 128 really quickly without even considering something like a different language. What about Chinese? What about German that might have umlauts in the alphabet? So the kind of modern version of ASCII is Unicode. And so there are many, many more possible Unicode characters. There's over 1 million possible kind of empty. Many of these codes are sitting empty. They haven't been mapped yet, so they don't actually have characters assigned to them. But with the current version of Unicode here in 2026, it's referred to as Unicode 17.0. Let me get my let's see if I can get my quota in here. As we're talking about Unicode, the most sexy possible thing we could talk about, let's...
Like my old pappy used to say, there's a polecat in the hen house.
My timing is terrible with this stuff. But, so currently Unicode, it has, since its inception in the early I think it's early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, it has added more and more characters to those empty slots, to those 1 million empty slots. And so currently there's about 160 slots that have been filled. So there's 160 Unicode characters that have a number or a sequence of numbers associated with them. And so everything that we're going to want to specify using numeric character references, which are kind of like shorthand Unicode codes, every one of those characters will also have a Unicode code. So what I'm presenting here is I'm giving you 3 different ways to specify that I'm interested in the A with the diatresis, or I think it's diatresis. What are the 2 little dots? Whoops, yep. I think they're called a dia something. A diacritical mark, but that's not what it is. There's actually, come on, there it is. Diareses. Sounds like a terrible disease that you don't want to get, but it's actually the name of those 2 dots. Diareses. Okay. So there's 3 different ways that we can specify those without hunting and searching for an image of this that we can paste into our editor that hopefully is going to be reproduced if we choose to share that specification with someone like a collaborator. Okay, so we'll check those out. And then just because, again, we're climbing the alphabet here and we're on the letter U this week, I stumbled across all of this stuff initially by thumbing through my old dictionary and seeing this word uncial, not knowing what it meant. But uncial script is an old type of calligraphy, basically. You might recognize it from, it looks like script that was common in old Bibles. I think this has a Roman or Latin origin. And a little bit of research into it that I looked at, it looked like it became something that was known by the 4th or 7th, so between the 4th and 7th century AD. So we'll check out uncial script as well, just because we're on the letter U. So we'll do umlauts, we'll check out Unicode because we're going to need it, and then we'll see if we can specify uncial script as well within documents that we craft. Okay, so I'm going to leave this open, and I don't think we need to be in a project directory for this. So I'm just going to come in fresh to RStudio. And let's create a new... We could do a markdown file. I haven't done markdown for a while. Actually, we just did markdown this morning. What am I talking about? We'll use Quarto, because Quarto and Markdown, the old R Markdown kind of language and Quarto share probably, I don't want to give it a number, but a very large percent of its content and specification and look and the way you interact with it. It's roughly the same, but we'll stick with kind of the new platform, which is Quarto. Again, my recommendation always is to just render the default boilerplate and make sure that your system is set up so it will produce something. Now, that, you know, last week when those templates didn't work for us is probably that's a good reminder of why just kind of coming in fresh and seeing that the template works and renders properly gives you some assurance that, you know, your system is set up properly, and that helps you in problem solving. Okay, so let's do an umlaut first. So one of the ways in which historically you specify these characters, well, that's not very helpful. All right, let's do, I'm gonna actually do a Unicode character search. And so you'll kind of see these repositories that have all kinds of symbols on them. There are emojis that have Unicode mappings to them as well. But there are all kinds of different places to go. Some of these I've found to be more helpful than others. A lot of these have kind of a 1990s feel to them in terms of just the structure of the website itself, which of course I like. Anything from the 90s is fine. But oh my goodness, let's start with umlauts. What I'm pulling up here is like advanced level characters. I want to start with a introductory level character. Wikipedia is not, you know, if I had a student doing this, I wouldn't shoot them, but I'd say, you know, don't be doing that. But this is actually a place that's been helpful in terms of finding codes for the characters that we might actually want to represent. Now, you know, I haven't found a great way to search for an actual character that you're looking for other than just kind of scrolling through. Now, there's some umlauts that we're finally seeing here. There's capital and uppercase and lowercase are intentionally meaningful. Let's do this one. That looks like, if anyone's a Monty Python fan, at the beginning of Holy Grail, the credits get hijacked, and they start talking about a moose, but the specification and the spelling of the moose uses this character or something that looks very similar to this character. Now what I did there was I just copied it. I copied it straight from the internet listing of this character. Let's look for a smaller one. And this is, you know, this is what, again, most people are probably going to prefer when you're using these special characters. But it is important to understand how to be able, again, to get that character to be recognized by your program with a code instead of using just copying and pasting there. Let's put it in a couple of times just to see what it looks like outside of the heading there. And then we'll do this also, we'll do this in typist, and maybe we'll do a quick PDF as well. Now, one of the things that happens with PDF documents traditionally is as we get further from those ASCII 128 characters, this is typist. As we get further from those 128 typist characters, which by the way which are the first 128 characters in the Unicode listing as well. As we get further and further away from those original ones, PDFs are going to have increasing difficulty in terms of representing that. So there might be some extra work that we need to do on the computer on our local machine in order to get the renderings that we want. But for something like a Monty Python moose character, which is what I'm going to call that, Monty Python moose character. PDF works fine, typist works fine, HTML works fine. And those are the three main document types that we've been focused on over the weeks, and I'm specifying that here on line 3 in my QMD file. Now, this specification, I should also be able to use these other representations and get that same character. And so, where's my slides? Did I close my slides? Why did I close my slides? You people should have told me not to close my slides. I'm blaming you. So there's my slides. And these specifications here, they're referenced differently across different sources. And it's probably because of people like me who use this, but aren't all that familiar with the history and the computer specifications of these codes themselves. This number, I believe, is what's referred to on the Wikipedia page. I believe that's this, which is called here, I believe, a metric. Let's see. Boy, it's way up there, isn't it? They need to repeat these headings. Decimal. Okay, decimal. We'll see if that's the decimal specification. 248. And so what I'd like to do there is I'd like to use that ampersand number. When I say 238, and then semicolon. And I understand this looks funny. And I understand you're probably saying, why would I do that when I could just copy and paste? You would do it because you can do it. That's why. And again, historically, we needed to do that. Okay, so that's obviously, so I obviously pulled the wrong number. That is referencing a character, but it's referencing an eye with a hat on it. So an eye that's prepared for a rainstorm. Should we look for that? Or should we just pull one of these other numbers? So I'm going to pull one of these other numbers and see if we can get, and we're going to come to, we're trying to use shortcuts right now, and the shortcuts, there's not going to be a shortcut for every character, but there will be a Unicode specification for every character. So this is kind of our fallback. We know this should work. I'm curious to know if we can use the shorthand notation. So I'm going to change that to 184. Wondering if we get our moose O instead of hat I. No, that's a different number as well. So 303027. It's interesting. I mean, it's probably incredibly uninteresting if you're watching me do this, but as someone who's going through this and trying to remember the mapping of these shorthand notations to what different sites are referring to when they're calling them, and then also just kind of how it's laid out. So let's try the Unicode specification, which should stem from this U plus OOF8. Now, what I'm focused on here is the bit after the U plus. So the leading zeros should be non-consequential. So I should actually be able to either use those or not use those. I would like to get back to my specification because the Unicode character syntax itself is going to want us to use these three leading characters, ampersand, pound, X. So ampersand, pound, X are meaningful, as is this semicolon. So ampersand, pound, X. And then we're gonna see if we can use the Unicode character for Moosey O, which is F8. So we'll take all four of them first. And then if this works, we'll see if we can specify it just with F8. Yeah, there it is. So that, I mean, using the full Unicode probably is the is probably the most reliable thing to do, especially since those kind of shorthand notations aren't always they're not always displayed in the same manner across the sources that you might go to find a listing. So for example, you almost, because Unicode mappings do change, I don't know if you can get like a hard copy listing of these things, or if we're just kind of stuck on the internet type web browser based repositories. So I'm gonna do something that looks kind of funny here and show you how this might not be this is something that, even though it's powerful because it's plain scripting, we're using normal convention characters. I can take this and put it in any text editor, share it with anyone in any part of the world, and they're going to be able to reproduce the characters that we have through using that Unicode kind of codex. But if I try to say the word moose here, what I've done is I've typed like I normally would, but instead of having O, I'm using this entire 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letter sequence. And that's where it gets a little kind of funny in terms of looking at it, but it should represent itself fine when we render. And there it is, there's moose. So let's see if we can get that in typist. And then PDF, traditionally, there was a different way to specify these special characters in PDF files via LaTeX, but I believe that this specification that we're using, which is the ampersand pound followed by semicolon convention, that's something that is from the HTML tradition, but I believe it's being recognized by Quarto in the production of PDFs as well. Again, PDFs take a little longer to render. Yay, there's moose. That's awesome. So again, you know, copying and pasting, you can do that, but you can also use this ampersand pound hashtag. Did I say that right? No, ampersand hashtag X trailing a semicolon convention to construct whatever characters you're interested in. You can also use these shortcuts, but as you've seen just from me, the shortcuts, you're gonna have to know the repository that you're pulling from a little better in order to use those shortcuts. Let's find a funny one here and just see if that works across these different. Ooh, there's a tilde and a umlaut. Look at that. So it's how do you pronounce that? Does anyone have any idea how you pronounce that? Maybe? That one looks a little more difficult to render because there's two elements over the top of it there. By the way, you can find, is that a tilde or what is it? It looks like a mean specification, which is just a bar. So it looks actually like a bar. And not the good kind of bar that has peanuts and beer. It's a mathematical kind of bar. Let's see if we can run. So PDF is gonna be the least forgiving here. I'm guessing with a character like that, we probably are going to need to goopify our PDF a little bit. That is, we're gonna need to add packages. We're gonna need to tell it where to look. But the HTMLs should be able to render all these Unicode characters. There's another word that's used here in this area, in this kind of specification of what these kind of unique characters look like, and that's UTF, or UTF with a number after it, and UTF-8 is the standard that's currently most popular in terms of being able to kind of recognize the Unicode value. And so one of the things we would have to probably do if this doesn't work, and I'm guessing it probably won't, is we have to go in there and we have to probably force that UTF-8 specification. We'll probably need to add some packages. Oh, it worked. Kind of. Okay, so yeah, it kind of worked. There's a little overplotting here. So diareses, if that's what we call them, and the bar are overplotting on the PDF. That's not entirely unexpected. One of the great things about typist is the renderings of these documents tend to lean a little more HTML-ish in terms of what they look like than PDF-ish. And that's just, it's easier. It's easier for us as we're specifying prose and text within these platforms that most people think of as facilitating just analytical things. Okay, so those are umlauts. Those are Unicode characters. Do you want to do another one? I guess I don't have that much time. So if you're interested in diving deeper on here, let me know. I guess my recommendation would be if you want to specify not through copy and paste, and I think there are definitely advantages, and it's not just tradition. Again, if you're sharing with someone who might have limited data editor or text editor capabilities, these codes are important. But if I were going to use these codes, I guess I probably would err on the side of using the full Unicode specification instead of those kind of shortcuts that I talked about. And the shortcuts are these numerical character references, which are shorter specifications of the same character. There's a text-based one that kind of tries to, this, for example, is saying a umlaut, and then this one again, depending on the source that you're pulling it from, that might have different references. I think I've seen it called metric. I think I've seen it just called element. But the full Unicode, it's, especially if it's got leading zeros and you can just drop them, that's not a big deal. Okay, so let's take a look at uncials. See if we can get uncials printed. Now, this is definitely going to differ based on whether we have an HTML product type or a different product type. The most straightforward way to get weird fonts using PDF and typist product types is to have them loaded on your local machine. Now we can also do that with HTML, but HTML as well. Well, let's see if we can do that. So let me show you how we can we should be able to specify this across product types. So I think over the weeks I've shown you how to, or we've talked about how to kind of focus on elements within your HTML product and to apply fonts in localized, specialized, focused areas. And we do that through CSS specification. But we should also be able to access fonts that are on our machine. I'm going to look for one that's a little stand out-ish, I guess. Impact, I have one on my machine, and I'm on a PC. I just did a search for fonts, and I see what's installed. I have one called Impact. So one of the things we should be able to do, and because there's no space in that font name, I think I should be able to just say it without using double quotes, but if it blows up, we'll come back and probably that's our first, that would be our first workaround to see if that needs quotes or double quotes. We could also look online and see what the Quarto kind of help pages. Whoa, that definitely had an impact, didn't it? Now, that complicated character that we talked about, it did not. It's standing out kind of on its own. So the font specification, if we wanted to force this into this weird font, there's probably some additional specifications that we would need to have. But it's funny, it came up with those more common characters, the characters that are going to be shared across. Well, I guess no, those wouldn't be ASCII, would they? Because it is a weird moose character. Okay, let's see what typist and PDF looks like. Now again, our supposition and our going into this if we're expecting something to crash, the expectation is it's going to crash with a PDF. This looks quite similar, I think, to, and by the way, these look different because they're fenced using ticks in my in my script itself. So these ticks here are saying I want this displayed. There's internal logic to say how that should be displayed, but typically it's mono. It's kind of mono. Is that the right word? It's equally spaced in terms of the distance between the characters that's displayed. So that's one of the reasons that looks different. Let's hold our breath and see if we can get a PDF on this. And then if we do, then we'll see if we can get uncial script. And then we can write our Bible. Then we should probably read the Bible. Uh-oh, what's going on? Okay, so this, yeah. PDF is not gonna, this is not, it's not gonna work directly on this weird font. Now, if we installed a less radical font, it's possible that it wouldn't be having this issue. The other thing that we can the other thing that's unique about PDFs is there's different engines that are used to create the PDF. And so one of the things that we might want to do, and I have to be mindful as well, that I'm using an older version of Quarto. But one of the things we might want to do is to force the engine here. So this is one of the things that PDFs will do is it will look for this TLMGR. It's a package manager, and it's going out there and it's saying, I can't do what you want me to do, but I'm going to look and see if there's a package that might be helpful. And if so, I'm going to install it, and maybe I can do what you want me to do. Tempted to just stop this. So let's see, do I have anything else that we haven't seen for a while that we could take a look at here? It's an oldie but a goodie.
Hell!
Just a flesh wound.
Forgot about that one. Let's let it sit for a while and let's look for an uncial script. I do not have uncial loaded on my computer, so we'll just verify that. There is, what is this? Javanese. I didn't know I had that. I like it. I got a lot of Asian characters on here, don't I? I wonder if that's just default, perhaps. I guess I'm not sure. Webdings, of course. Here's the Disney font, Waltograph. I had to, so I was looking for a Disney font when we took a look at the Pluto notebook environment, and that's a notebook environment that's used for, was it Julia? I think it was used for Julia. Or no, Observable? I forget. It was used, it's used exclusively for one language. I think it probably is Julia. Okay, so it can't be found. Now, one of the things that I want to try here is, I think the specification is engine, but we should be able to, I want to specify something called LaTeX. And it's a, I'm not sure if that's the PDF engine that's currently being used, but it's one that, if my memory serves me right, is a little more permissive. This is what we want, PDF engine. Little more permissive to like what we're trying to do here. So this would be my first workaround before saying, we need to look for a different font specification. I'm going to look for a different way to render the PDF and see if maybe that's see if that works a little better. Now there's another one called LaTeX, I believe. And if this doesn't work, we might try that. But while it's thinking, let's go ahead and I'll leave this not full screen so we can actually see what's going on in the background. But let's look for an uncial script or font. I'm sorry, we don't want to. Let's see if we can find a font. This is the one, so this is, I've been here before because I used this script on this week's slides to create, it's a little easier to see on the title slide, I think, to create this. So I actually have used this script, but I don't have it on my computer. So I used the script on my HTML slides, and I used it in a CSS specification. But we should be able to get the font as well. Why did it? I don't know why it gave me 6. But uncial is there. Uncial Antica. And I think I'm gonna put these, where do I'm just gonna keep these in my downloads folder. Because once we get them, we're gonna have to kind of communicate to our local machine that these are now there. That is, I have them downloaded from, oh, it still didn't like it. What was the other one I said? LaTeX? Off the top of my head, I'm not sure that's correct. Yeah. Okay, so this is different. So it's the syntactic specification looks a little different. So it's possible that I neglected to specify this LaTeX colon kind of specification. Which doesn't really look right to me, but we'll try that. Let's do a quick grok on this. So I'm saying, how do I specify LaTeX within my Quarto authored PDF? And I'm just curious to see if my kind of structure is right. Yeah. Oh, format P. So we might have. I specified it as a kind of a first level command. It may need to be a second or third level command. So we'll see if that does anything. At least that looks to me a little. That looks to me a little better in terms of the structure of it. It looks like it's still it still doesn't like that font. So, so we may kind of have the same issues there. All right, but we were taking a look at uncial and seeing if we could specify uncial. Now, I'm going to want to find my fonts again. And in my listing of fonts, there is a drag and drop install again here on my PC. The procedure for a Mac is gonna be different, of course. And depending on the operating system that you have, it might be different for a Windows-based machine as well. I'm running Windows 10 here yet. If I had my preference, I'd be running Windows XP. And it looks like it just wants, I don't know, I'm not sure this is gonna be effective for us, because it looks to me like the file type that it has there, the TTF, I don't think these other, well, it is a TTF. It certainly doesn't seem to like it. Oh. It was really weird. It was dragging and it said no, dragging said no, dragging said no, and then It's like, okay, there you go. Uncial Antica. So we'll see if we can. So the PDF, even with LaTeX, doesn't like, does not like that font. We'll try one more, see if we can force it. And again, this is kind of one of the old strategies to kind of try to force PDFs to do something that you know work within these different product types, but you're getting a little more pushback. Look at that. I did not expect that to work. And the the actual funny moose-looking O looks like it's rendering fine. Now again, with the typist and the HTML documents, we saw our weird U with the diareses as well as the bar on top. We saw that came through. It was not affected by the different font type, but it came through here in the PDF, and this is kind of what I was expecting earlier, is we're just getting a blank. And so we would have to, even though it found our font, which is great, we would have to have extra packages in order to recognize that kind of odd character. I'm going to take it out because we don't need that. So main font, let's see if we can just specify, and now there is a space, so I do not like spaces as a 1990s trained computer guy, because they're notorious for throwing all kinds of errors. But Quarto is actually really kind of impressive in terms of its ability to handle spaces. So we'll try it first without any double quotes up here in terms of getting our document, our HTML document, to render using that biblical kind of font. And if it doesn't work, you're gonna see this. So if it doesn't work, it's not always gonna throw you an error. It's just gonna say, I don't know what you wanted to do, but I can't do it. Looks like it doesn't. Huh. It doesn't like that. And I don't usually apply fonts in this manner. What? Typist found it, but HTML didn't. That is bizarre. That looks kind of cool though, doesn't it? Like, I would like to add some color to some of this, which we could do. Then it would look more biblical, I think. Right? We should have a block behind these capital starting letters. It would look like one of those old 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th century Bibles. I can get my quote in here. Okay. So let's see if we can get the HTML working. It's possible. Why? That really floors me. Because, and PDF, I'm just guessing, is not gonna work. It's funny. HTML is almost universally more permissive, but me not using this process with HTML, it's possible that it, what? PDF? That looks good. There is some overriding, so the headings are not picking up on it, is what it looks like. These are first and second level headings. But, oh, that's me. I'm sorry, that's on me. Because what we've specified is main font, that's only applying to the body of the document, not to the headings. So we'd have to have more specifications here. And it's possible that font is a specification instead of... See if there's a different command other than main font. It looks like it is main font. again, the theming. I want to see if there's a different main font, font size, mono font. Yeah, it looks to me like main font is probably the primary. We would have to go in there and specify secondary font as well. That must be what's being displayed in this particular case in the headings. I cannot believe the only one that's not working on uncial script is the HTML document. What is wrong with you, HTML? You're always so forgiving.
What?
That is bizarre. Okay, so let's force it the way I normally would. And so I'm gonna put in a CSS chunk in here. So I'm gonna steal a bit of code that I use on these weekly sessions. And this is the normal way that I specify fonts within HTML files. And in the interceding week, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look and see how I need to communicate that the font I want is located where it is. Because to me, what it looks like is happening is the HTML rendering is just not looking in the proper place for that font. I'm guessing. I mean, what do I know? But let's do two things. So one thing, let's see where the heck we are here. I'm gonna see if I can put that font within the same space that this document is being rendered. And so it should just be that TTF. You know, and I guess you got to be a little persistent with this. I was really surprised that there was such kind of difficulty just simply dragging it into my fonts folder. You can see all kinds of silliness I have here. Now, in addition to that silliness, now I have an uncial, where is it? There it is, font specification. And so the very first thing I'm going to do before we get too elaborate is we'll just see if maybe it just didn't know where to look. That looks different, doesn't it? Why does it look different? What is going on with HTML? HTML, you're funny. You so funny. So I'm gonna steal a little bit of code just so we can see if I know we can get that script operative within an HTML document because I used it for this week's slides. I had to reorganize everything with Posit, the company that we love, kind of putting to bed the book down site that I used to use. That I used to use to host. So I still have things kind of organized. It still takes me a little longer to find them than what I'm used to. So before I try to apply it, I just want to see if reading it in, and the way we apply it is, we should be able to apply it a few different ways. The cleanest way would be to go in there and find the actual CSS command that is in charge of what these fonts are displayed as. Off the top of my head, it's not something I want to handle. So I think the first thing I want to do is just see if we do an import from the internet, which is what this @import URL specification is. It just says, instead of us going in there and asking for the entire font TTF specification, please just HTML browser, please just go and find that and then apply it. So let's just see if that helps us. It does. Okay, so I think what that's telling us is that there's going to be a second level specification that we're going to need to use with HTML if we want to point it toward where our fonts are located. And so this is kind of starting to strike a little bit of a memory in me. So I think I remember needing to specify in the YAML where to actually look for the font. So not just main font, but where to look for the font. So we probably needed to do that. And we bypassed that when we said just go get it. Now interestingly, you're seeing a different structure here in terms of the impact of this font within the HTML file, because all elements here are now being displayed using that uncial script. And it looks great. I mean, this is the best looking of them. Now, maybe it's just, everything tastes better when you're super hungry. Maybe it's just that this is the one that we had the most problems with, and that's why I think I like it the best. But I love it. I think it looks fantastic. Now this is easy. We could, on this very easily, we could do our colors and backgrounds, and maybe let's do that really. No, it's already 7:20, so we'll drop it. Okay, thanks everybody. So next week we're on to the letter TUV. So I'm, off the top of my head, I don't know what we're gonna cover. Hopefully I don't need to consult my old dictionary again to find a topic. But if there's any questions or requests, as always, drop them and we'll take a look at them. Otherwise, happy uncial scripting and happy Unicode using. Again, it's old. It's an old way to specify these special characters using that those Unicode values. But I think it's probably important to know, because there will be a circumstance where that is a way that you work around maybe having a difficulty in getting a character to render or share across text editors. Okay, thanks everybody. See you next week.